Hey guys, Graham and Chris here with you at a left field. We are live here at Chase Field, TGI Fridays, front row, sports and grill in Phoenix, Arizona. My man, it has been way too long.
Only about a decade, man.
Just give or take, nothing bad.
Glad to have you back out here in the Southwest, or out here in the Southwest for the first time.
Toasty.
It is a little warm today. What are we about? Just under 100 degrees today, nice and sunny. The roof will probably be closed tonight when we get here for the Cubs game. But meanwhile,
it's a Cubs home game, isn't it?
Yeah, well, at least it seemed that way yesterday. It was a sea of blue and white yesterday.
That's all I heard. I mean, every 6-4-3, the Cubs fans cheered. There was no Diamondbacks love lost.
Let's not forget that the "Let's Go Cubbies" chants were at least 3 times as loud as the "Let's Go D-backs" chants. And "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" was a rousing rendition of
"Let's Go."
If the Cubbies don't win, it's a shame.
It is.
So, but
I was first time in our we're actually going to hear him play "Go Cubs Go." It had me a little bit concerned.
Would have been maybe raise the W flag.
Who knows? But as we put the ball in play here on our live broadcast, as we do every week, let's look at the standings. Okay, everything's pretty much chalk from what we've been seeing. Okay, Red Sox still on top, really starting to go ahead and they're finding that gap. Okay, we're 3.5 games up off the Yankees, the Indians 3.5 games on the Twins,
right,
and the Astros, while still looking great at 71 wins, we're starting to see a big separation here, more in teams in the two opposite leagues here in the West, as the Dodgers have come up to an 81-win season, and they have shown no look at stopping or slowing down or anything.
No.
It's a good possibility they're going to end up being the first team to 90 before the Stros even hit 80 wins.
Absolutely, and which is something incredible because, as we discussed before, Astros are the first to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then all of a sudden you have the Dodgers who are first to 60, 70, and 80.
Right.
And now we're in a position where they might get to 90 before the Stros even get to 80, which, as we're going to discuss later in the show, has implications for possible record-setting years in wins for the Dodgers this year.
And the last time we saw something even close to that was with the Mariners. I think it was back in 2000. Is it 01?
I think it was 01.
Was it the year the Diamondbacks ended up winning the World Series, of course, aforementioned being here at Chase Field. But then, I mean, they kind of got unceremoniously bounced in the postseason, I think, by the Yankees.
By the Yanks, yeah.
Who ended up going and losing in Game 7 that year. The only, I think, loss that Mariano Rivera suffered ended up being the blown save that cost the Yankees that World Series, which was just crazy.
Yeah.
But, again, end of the day, we're talking about a Cubs team who, again, we said last week made the great move in adding Alex Avila and, of course, Justin Wilson. But Wilson Contreras is hurt, and that makes the Avila move even more important to this team. Avila was solid yesterday, had some good hits, surprisingly some timely bunting for a catcher his size, laying down some good small ball wood.
Right,
but that's a big thing to have him now with Contreras out 4 to 6 weeks now, it seems, with a hamstring issue.
And the problem with Contreras being out 4 to 6 weeks, that puts him back in the lineup, possibly right in the middle of what is looking to like it's going to shape up to be a very tight NL Central race. You've got St. Louis at a game back of Chicago, but only a game back by virtue of the fact that Chicago has lost fewer games and played fewer games.
Exactly.
So they both at 60 wins, but you have Milwaukee at 59 wins. You have Pittsburgh at 58 wins, only 3 games out of the division. After we said a couple of weeks ago they should be sellers at the deadline.
And Garrett Cole should be moving. And that brings us really into the big talk about the wild card is that NL wild card is it's stupid how close. I mean, it is so compact in the first 4 or 5 teams that are outside of those 1 and 2 marks. We've got, 4 or 5 teams the last time we looked that are within about 2.5 games of that second wild card slot.
That's the American League wild card.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
And the AL wild card is looking like it's going to be a lot of fun this year.
Yes.
You've got, for right now, you've got New York and Minnesota in there by virtue of the fact that the Mariners blew a 4-run lead in the 7th inning last night against Los Angeles Angels.
Jason Winston, I'm sorry. We were so excited. It was 5-1. You had to leave, and it went 5-5. We had to hear the end, and they lose 6-5. It was that's a painful way to go if you're an M's fan.
Jason, just so you know, we did listen to that game on the way home from the ball field last night. It was a difficult game to listen to, and I wasn't smiling like a Cheshire cat, probably.
But I mean, yeah. Let's look at this. In Toronto, I think we still think is probably out of it, and which is odd to say they're 4 games out of the wild card. But if we go from the furthest out to the nearest, the Rangers are 3 games back. The Orioles are 2 games back. Royals a game and a half. The Rays and the Mariners and the Angels all a half game back, sitting at 59 and 58, with the Twins now taking the half game lead in the Yankees with a substantial 3-game lead in the wild card 1 spot. But, I mean, the amount of movement that we're seeing here in these central teams is just mind-blowing.
And realistically, there's going to be more movement.
Yes.
We're going to see a lot of movement throughout these next 2 months, these last 2 months of the season. And one of the movements we might see, depending on how these moves that were made at the trade deadline go for the New York Yankees, could be the Yankees coming out of that number 1 wildcard spot into that divisional lead, bringing Boston down. But Boston has a pretty hefty lead right now. It would take probably Aaron Judge at his early season form and the rest of the Yankees really stepping up to pull that off.
Judge needs to pull that average back up another 30 points to get back into the 320 mark. And there needs to be a little bit more consistency out of that Yankees team. I think they're going to have a solid, no concern hold on the first wild card spot. I think that the Red Sox are going to go ahead and take this because of just how good Chris Sale is. I mean, and let's talk about that. And we saw that when I got in town, it happened. But Chris Sale hit his 15th game this year of 10 Ks or more. Just an absolute tear. Now, the hard thing is, yes, it drives that pitch count up, but he is just blowing guys away on a consistent basis with the Red Sox.
And to have Chris Sale, who we have last year we took a look at as possibly somebody who's not worth
a locker room issue.
The money that he's asking for. Maybe the trade was good for Boston, we said when it happened, but seeing what he's come to Boston and done and striking out 10-plus guys in 15 outings this year puts him behind 2 huge names in Major League Baseball history, one of whom is Arizona Diamondbacks' own Randy Johnson. And then number 1 is Pedro Martinez.
And I mean, and we had said for a lot, when we first saw these moves, the Yoan Moncada, there were a lot of really good prospects that the Red Sox went ahead and said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and let you go for Chris Sale. We think Chris Sale is the piece we need behind David Price, who, again, the concern is just rising for David Price.
It's health.
But it is so evident that the pieces that they gave up for now are going to pay dividends potentially much longer than what those pieces might amount to. I mean, again, this is a prospective move for the White Sox to hope that at least one of these guys, Moncada being one who we've seen up this year in the bigs, are going to have enough talent to make them a 5, 6, 7 year plus big league player for that ball club in Chicago. Chris Sale comes over, already is a perennial all-star, and is just, I mean, I think at this point he has got the stranglehold similar to Judge and Bellinger for Rookie of the Year on that AL Cy Young. If he loses it, something dramatic has to happen that is going to just blow me away.
Well, I think that the only guy that we ever even gave a shot at upsetting him for that AL Cy Young at this point probably isn't going to be a factor. Keuchel. Yeah. He's running into issues out in Houston. He's got his own set of problems going on. He's on sort of a downward slope at this point.
And the health issues are mounting down there.
Yeah, and now McCullers, his number 2 guy, might not even be back in time, hopefully for the postseason, but he might not even be back by the end of this season. He hasn't even thrown a bullpen yet, which is a worrying statistic if you look at it, because this is a team that is set to make a deep playoff run, but without those 2 guys healthy and back, and the other 3 guys in that rotation, 3 big names in that rotation healthy and playing the way that they play, this is something that we're not going to be we're going to be looking at those Houston Astros as the White Sox of last year, who started off really, really hot.
I don't think it's going to go. They'll make the postseason. I don't think there's a concern there. But I mean, it might even be something like the Rangers last year, who just dominated, and then I believe it was the Blue Jays went ahead, moved them out of the way, and then of course Cleveland comes through and beats Toronto. So we made almost an exact same similar exit in the same division, Rangers Astros, and that's why Keuchel was just so ticked off that they aren't making heavy moves for arms. Yes, Liriano comes through, but he's been more of a bullpen guy than a starting guy. Where is going to be that piece that you're going to bring into your rotation to have a number 1, number 2 type arm behind maybe a Keuchel and move McCullers to a 3 spot. They need that. I'm not seeing who's on waivers, though, aside from Verlander yet for that, though.
Okay, and so what about that? So Justin Verlander, it was announced today that Justin Verlander will have the opportunity possibly to put an opt-out in his contract if he gets traded.
Yeah.
Meaning that if he's traded, he'll finish out the year and then he can opt out of his contract for the following year.
Or the next year.
Or the year after.
Opt out for either remaining years, and he's owed roughly $55 million, give or take.
So if Justin Verlander's a guy for a 2-month, possibly 3-month rental if you're deep into the postseason, if you going to pay $10 million for that rental, is that a guy that the Houston Astros look at, or are we thinking maybe the Dodgers are just going to make a hardcore run at him at this point?
I don't know the Dodgers are going to make – I mean, again, and the point that you make makes perfect sense of they're at the luxury tax max, so you're not going to pay anything more to grab him. It makes perfect sense to bring him in, and we've said that the logic of having Kate Upton as your fiance, who's going to be primarily in L.A. a lot of the time, is a good move for them. I would love – for them to grab Verlander. Again, my concern is beyond the Dodgers, who at this point, if they play 500 baseball, are going to come damn close to breaking the single-season win record, as you just mentioned. But my worry is what pitchers on waivers, what are the Dodgers going to do to help alleviate these issues? We're not there's no, to use a military term, I don't feel that sense of urgency that the Astros should be having right now.
Well,
based on the season they began with, everyone had them penciled in as the World Series favorite. Now, after the Jay Bruce grab, which we're going to get into here in a minute, to me, the Astros aren't even the favorite in the American League.
Right, and that's the same lack of urgency that we saw at the trade deadline. Both you and I said that the Astros' lack of movement, lack of involvement at the trade deadline was something that could possibly signal a downturn for them coming out of the trade deadline. They made little to no movement at that deadline, and there were pieces that were available that could have very well helped them stay in a position to at least run neck and neck with a team like the Dodgers. And they just simply didn't make those moves. And now that we're coming to what's going to be the absolute end of movement here on September 1st for any possibility to use a player in the postseason, these waiver trades are going to be important for them. And if they don't make some moves, like you said, this is not a team that we can any longer look at and say they're the definite absolute favorite towards going into the postseason.
Not at all. And with the way that Pomeranz has been pitching in Boston, which we discussed last week, if David Price can get healthy and find a groove, I would put the Red Sox over the Astros right now. And I think with the way that the Indians rotation looks, obviously, we saw a really nice outing by I think it was Carrasco last night in Tampa, took a no-hitter into the 6th. I believe that the Indians topped Tampa in that game. Corey Kluber, for a guy who was hurt the first couple of months of the year, is making a great case to be a late addition into the Cy Young race behind Chris Sale. The Indians and the Red Sox, and I'm going to give a little bit of push towards the Indians because of Encarnacion. I mean, we're starting to see why that's paying off. They've got the pieces to make another run into the World Series.
Well, at this point, the only thing holding Kluber back from that Cy Young mention at this point, and you're absolutely right, he very well could come in as Cy Young number 2, but the problem with Corey Kluber is he hasn't played this season. He's just coming back from the DL, so that's going to hurt his chances. Now we have a question from Alan. Are the Astros the Nationals from the previous 3 seasons? So what he's asking is, are the Astros going to be the Nationals teams who make those runs up to the playoffs where they absolutely trounce their division, get into the playoffs, possibly go to the NLCS, in the Astros case would be the ALCS, and get bounced out by teams like the Giants and the Cardinals? Is that what we're going to see from the or the Mets? Is that what we're going to see from the Astros this year?
I think that the issue you have, and Alan, I appreciate you watching. Alan, if you guys didn't see the video a couple weeks ago, we did a show together over in Melbourne on Space Coast Daily. Appreciate you tuning in, taking a look. I don't think so. Again, I think similar to what we saw with the Mets, there are injury issues there, but there have been injury issues up and down the Astros lineup 4 out of the 5 starters ended up going on the DL this year. You have the Correa issue.
Within weeks of each other.
Yes, the Springer issue. A lot of those pieces that were just raking the ball are now not being able to play on a consistent basis. It's one of the difficulties of the rigor of a 162-game season.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all going to come down to what team stayed healthy the longest and is currently healthy the best moving into a month and a half where you're going to play a team 7 times in 8 or 9 days on a consistent basis. You're going to get to know each other inside and out very, very quickly. You're
going to see every member of the rotation, probably every member of the bullpen. You'll probably see every member of the rotation in 6 or 7 at-bats throughout there. You'll see at least everybody in the bullpen once or twice.
But the difference here is the Astros, while we knew the Astros would be good, I don't think any of us thought they were going to be this good, this fast, this year.
No.
To me, the Astros are kind of like the Rockies. They're 2 surprise teams, and it's a bigger story of just how bad the Rangers ended up being this year and selling off guys like the Yu Darvish. Odor gets the big contract and has performed horrifically, barely hitting 220.
Yeah.
We're just not seeing the same production from those guys. So I think the Astros have the pieces in place to contend the next several years, and we're seeing the same thing that the Nationals are doing is fixing those holes. They grabbed I think it was Doolittle and somebody else from the Athletics for that bullpen. Right. So they're making the moves. The nice thing with the Astros is they're almost a year, maybe 2 years ahead of schedule. Now you fill those holes with a very young roster that you have in control for a while. The Astros are primed to be a team similar to maybe even the Yankees, who have young pieces, and the Cubs in control to make consistent pushes in the postseason. The odd thing here is that because of this influx of youth, very, very young guys who have been so good so fast, we are in a potential possibility to see a lack of parity in Major League Baseball just because of how good these teams are with guys in control. But it makes the wild card and that second wild card that they put in a couple of years ago just that much better and more important for the game.
And a whole lot more fun to watch.
Definitely.
Because now we're going to see exactly what those 2 wild cards were supposed to bring us, which is 2 phenomenal teams who couldn't win their division for whatever reason, especially in the National League West. No one's catching the Dodgers. We're going to get to that in just a second. Yeah. No one's catching the Dodgers, but the Diamondbacks and the Rockies right now are really running that division. Sans the Dodgers, either of those teams could be neck and neck for the lead of that division. And we're going to get to potentially watch those 2 teams in a single-game playoff at the end of this year, because that's exactly what that second wild card was supposed to bring us. Was that one really great playoff game between 2 phenomenal teams who, for whatever reason, didn't win their division. And,
well, 2 phenomenal teams who didn't win their division because one team just went ahead and looked in the rearview mirror and said goodbye.
Speaking of which, so the Dodgers are 81-34 right now.
Is that good?
It's not bad.
I mean, when you think of the fact, I think we said this last week, that the Dodgers have almost the same number of losses as the Phillies have wins.
Luckily for the Phillies, they have about 10 more wins than the Dodgers have losses.
Thankfully.
Still not saying much.
No.
But so you and I on the way here, we were discussing mathematically, the Dodgers could almost play 500 baseball, which they've played 700 baseball almost all season.
Yeah.
They are currently playing 705 baseball. The Dodgers could mathematically play almost 500 baseball for the rest of the season and break the M's 2001 116-win record. Now, my friend Jason, who we came to the Cubs game with last night, had mentioned the possibility, being worried, he's an M's fan, mentioned the possibility that the Dodgers could break that record and that would be painful for him to watch. I didn't really think at the time about how likely it was.
Exactly.
They only need 35 more wins.
To tie it.
And
out of 50
we're
games.
only 115 games into the season. So, mathematically, the Dodgers are looking like they're going to be the team to break the 116-win record. Now, hopefully, that doesn't mean that they're going to do what the Mariners did, go into the first round of the playoffs and get knocked out. There are teams in that microcosm of the playoffs who could do it.
Happen. I mean, we saw Yu Darvish pitch when we went to dinner on Thursday. Watched Yu Darvish pitch here at Chase Field, and just that breaking ball was just disgusting.
Yeah.
And it wasn't one of those fall off the table, break your knees. It's just you don't see it coming, and then there's just a little bit of drop that puts it in the zone, and you weren't looking for it.
And it wasn't just a sink, and it wasn't just a curve, and it wasn't just a slider. It was all of them.
Everything was
Every
working.
single thing he threw broke exactly where he wanted it to, and he was placing it. And he was getting strike 3 calls on pitches that guys looked like they were going to dive out of the way of, and it just broke right into the zone, right through the zone, and they stood there frozen. Yeah. And then we saw Peralta, I think it was, get frozen on that strike 3 fastball that was just right at the bottom of the zone, straight heat to the bottom of the zone, and he hadn't seen a fastball the whole at bat, and it froze him. Kind of reminded us of that World Series strike 3
on Miggy
of Romo's, where he threw breaking ball after breaking ball and then froze him with that strike, with that fastball.
The worst thing you can see from a big leaguer is when that is before the umpire even rings him up and the head drops.
Yeah, he just
there is no chirping at that point.
No.
When you just drop and start trudging off before you turn back, there is no griping at that point.
Yeah, he knew. He knew exactly what had just happened. He knew that was strike 3. He just wasn't expecting. He was looking breaking stuff, and he got hard stuff all the way.
So I think we pretty much agree. The Dodgers are – while I think the Dodgers are primed for the World Series, the National League is a gauntlet.
Yes.
I mean, there is no easy out right now.
No.
If the Cubs are on now, granted, the game last night was long. It was Lackey. It was Taijuan Walker. No one seemed to be finding the zone. The pitching was not solid. It just, it got out of hand. I mean, it was 11 runs total, but that happened really from the 7th inning beyond. That was it was a 3-1, 3-2 game up until the 6th. It was just pretty quiet, but it drug on. The big thing is going to be the pitching for the Cubs. But when you look at those teams, like you said, Diamondbacks, the Rockies, the National, there is no easy team going all the way through. There shouldn't be an easy team, obviously, in any level when you're into the postseason. But the question now becomes, if you have to pick a club from the American League to represent them in the World Series, where do you go? And we discussed the Astros being a question mark, but that Jay Bruce grab that the Indians picked up from the Mets, and there was a talk that the Yankees were interested in Bruce as well and didn't end up pulling the trigger. And Bruce was going to waive his no-trade clause for a contender, according to reports. He ends up going to Cleveland, who was not on the no-trade list, instead of to a crosstown rival who was on his no-trade clause.
Right.
So, I mean, a great pickup for the Indians, and probably a bit of a jab from from Queens over to the Bronx. Hey, we're not going to give you what you need to have a long run. But I mean, this is like a Lucas Duda type grab,
right?
For
exactly,
Cleveland.
Exactly. And the big deal here is that while Jay Bruce might not be a huge bat,
right,
he's a consistent bat.
Very.
Now, he does have some control issues at the plate. He strikes out a lot. But as we've discussed, I think on the show a little bit, but personally quite a bit, we're moving into an area in baseball, into an era in baseball where strikeouts aren't looked down upon like they used to be.
Right.
Nowadays, hitters really feel like a strikeout is an out is an out.
Right.
If you strike out or you ground out, you still didn't reach base. It doesn't matter how you did it. Swing away, try to hit the ball as hard as you can.
You're going to the Pine Pony either way. How you got there is irrelevant.
And the reason we're in that place now is because coming off of that home run era, right? What we call the quote unquote steroid era, where you have Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds and Sosa and those guys who are hitting the ball just a mile. Mm-hmm. Then you come into an era of guys who are throwing 98, 99 miles an hour as starters, able to throw 100+ pitches and still hit 99, the Justin Verlanders of the world,
the Matt Cains,
of the world.
We saw all those control guys, and we're starting again.
Right, and now we're coming out of that era again, and we're coming into the era of contact hitters. And these are contact hitters are guys who are going to swing at the ball. Power hitters are guys who are going to swing at the ball a lot.
The Altuves, the Correa, the guys who are making an effort to
the judges
put the ball in. Yeah, making an effort to adjust and put the ball in play. The scary thing is once those guys become contact and power and they can balance that out,
right,
that's when pitchers are going to be in for very, very long outings.
The key is Jay Bruce is a guy who's hitting 256 or 258, I think, right now. 258 on the season between his 400
right
with the Cubbies or with the tribe,
right,
and his 256 with the Mets, but he's hitting 258. He's got a 322 on base. That's not phenomenal, but he's got 29 dingers.
Yeah, it's decent.
Right? He's hitting the ball out of the park. He's slugging .518. He's got an OPS over 800. So this is a big deal for them. And
I'll be
defensively,
honest, a 1 to 3 strikeout rate to walk. I mean,
right.
39 walks to 103 Ks is not horrible.
Right.
We've seen much worse.
And defensively, he's a good move for the Indians.
He is.
He's a strong defensive move. He's a consistent bat. And that's the issue that we've run into with Encarnacion over the course of this season. I remember coming into the season when the Indians came here to Chase Field.
Right.
Encarnacion was hitting about 20 points below the Mendoza line. That's not something you expect to see from Encarnacion. Now, we said when the trade happened or when the pickup happened in the offseason that he's not a 300 hitter.
Right.
He's a mid-twos hitter, but when you see him hitting 180, 179, you know that he's struggling.
And the odd thing is it's not like you're going from one league to the other. You're staying, you're seeing the same personnel that you're used to.
Right. Exactly.
I think that was concerning, but again, I mean, he's a professional and he pulled off of that. But the 106 total hits that Bruce has, 20 doubles, 29 dingers. So for the most part, he's a contact guy, gets you to first, and he'll move around from there. But 49 total extra base hits,
exactly,
out of 106. That's still, granted, it's just below 50%, but not. I mean, when half your hits are getting you at least 2 or more bags,
right?
What you're hoping is that you're plating runs, and he's 3/4 of the way to the century mark in ribbies. 75 ribs on 49 extra base hits. That's what you want to see. You're putting him in a position to get guys who are on base across the plate. You can almost have him as, if you can find that consistency, if it stays there, he's almost a second cleanup guy in the 6-7 spot.
Right, exactly. And that's exactly what he is.
Tito Frank, as a manager, like a Tito Francona, you love that because now there really is no safe span. It's like having J.D. Martinez when he came here, and we've seen that the way he's hitting.
They throw him in the 7 slot.
Very similar numbers, very similar player, and it gets you that ability to go, okay, you know what? He didn't get him in, but he might have gotten 2 guys in, and we still have 2 on, and he just struck out. It's okay. I'll finish it up for you.
Right, exactly.
You people think the bottom third of the order is kind of your weaker hitters. The way that the teams go now and hitters are now, 6 and 7 should be just as important as 3 and 4.
Exactly. And one of the keys to that is also in the American League, with the designated hitter rule in effect, you can afford to put that guy 7, maybe even 8, and not expect that that's just an out that you have to deal with. Whereas in the National League, that 9 slot and that 8 slot, those are your weak guys. You understand that. You realize that when the 9 slot comes up, you're going to probably have to deal with an out. That's your pitcher slot, unless you're talking about guys like Madison Bumgarner, unless you're talking about guys like Jake Arrieta who can hit the ball, who can swing a bat. But for the most part, that's the gimme out.
Right. Did you hear that? Oh, that was a cheers for Miami, I heard. My bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, everybody in Miami should be happy right now.
They are.
Not only is it cheers, but it's that, again, the whoosh from across the from the East Coast, the collective sigh of relief, now that the Marlins have agreed to a sale to a group led emotionally and
not as much financially.
Not financially.
And he will not have the amount of control that he wanted.
Right.
But Derek Jeter is going to bring a very good pedigree to a ball club, a winning mentality, the idea of doing things the right way.
And we saw when he retired that there was a little bit of repair of the friendship between him and A-Rod. I wouldn't be surprised to see A-Rod possibly get involved with that team in the front office.
I would.
Really?
Yes.
They seemed pretty close at his retirement ceremony.
No, there was an interview not too long before that. That was to say forced would be an understatement. I would see that interview. I would be highly, highly surprised.
They seemed pretty natural at his retirement ceremony to me.
I don't
a lot
know,
of hugs, a lot of slaps on the back.
I don't know why an A-Rod would fit in a front office.
His head might not fit through the door.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's one of those things where, if you're going to have A-Rod,
that's his hometown. He's going to want to be involved with that team in his hometown.
Then hire him as a consultant, like the Yankees wanted to do. But I don't need him. I don't need him in a suit at one Marlins place on a consistent basis.
But he loves to wear a suit.
I know. But he can wear one as a consultant,
right?
But I mean, he's doing the Fox thing. I don't see the need to bring him on as a front office piece because he's not really going to bring you a whole lot as a front office guy. I don't think his name doesn't carry the weight of respect that you want from someone like that. So why have
in New York City? Well, really in Major League, especially in New York City.
Yeah, we haven't had the space like we've had with the Giants to bring in Barry Bonds,
and
everything is much too close, much too fresh, and he is still vilified by a large majority of all of baseball fans.
Right, and I think eventually we're going to see him get involved in that team. It is his hometown. That's probably where he's going to end up living. He's probably going to be involved with them. I wouldn't be surprised. Don't look for him in the owner's box, sitting next to Jeter watching a game.
Right. That's
not what I'm saying. I don't think they're that buddy anymore.
I don't know. If he and J-Lo are still hanging out, maybe you get J-Lo. I mean, that might bring people to the ballpark. I'm just saying that having J-Lo at the games consistently. I mean, again,
would she sing the national anthem every game?
She might. I mean, it's the idea of really – but you are embracing that Cuban and Latin American culture in that way, and I do understand it, and I like that part.
Right. But with the level of control that Jeter's going to end up with, which is not where he wanted to be.
Right.
I think he wanted to be one of the major controlling interests in that team, and he's not going to be. The question remains, are we going to see Jeter in the owner's box on a regular basis? Because the other members of that group, these are big – corporate guys, obviously, who bring a lot of money to the table, not a lot of baseball to the table. But a lot of guys like that, the Marlins' current owner included in that club, are guys who are, now they've bought a baseball team, they want to sit in the box, they want to be originally
We've seen that with Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, now I didn't see that. I know that he had reached out to Michael originally to try and get him interested in that owners group. I don't know if that still happened. I don't know if he did or not. But I think
the nice thing,
I don't know that he'll be there every game.
Right.
But he's a guy who you're going to want to have around your ball club.
And the nice thing about having Derek Jeter, who, if you hate the Yankees and you have nothing nice to say about Derek Jeter, you can at least say that Derek Jeter engenders a culture of winning.
Yeah.
The nice thing about having Derek Jeter involved in the ownership of the Marlins is now we might finally start to see a team who rebuilds properly
and a team that cares
and maintains those rebuilds instead of rebuild, win, fire sale.
Right.
Rebuild, win, fire sale.
I want you to think about something. You say a culture of winning. Derek Jeter, one time in his career, had a season in which his team was mathematically eliminated from postseason contention on a day prior to the last day of the year. Only once.
Yeah. That's the value of having a culture of winning. And Derek Jeter's going to bring that because Derek Jeter engenders. He was the captain of that team.
So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the one question that everyone's dying to know. You've asked me. I'm not the guy to answer it because I just don't give as much of a hoot as you guys do. It doesn't bother me as much. Does Derek Jeter remove the statue?
I hope so. This is something we talked about last night, too.
You don't want to see dolphins and flamingos and swordfish just going in circles? Come on.
Monument to horror in center field. And we've talked about why it's there and the owner of the Marlins being a big fan of art. And the problem is that you can be a big fan of art, but there is nothing about that statue in center field at Marlins Park that screams art to anyone.
The beholder.
Yeah, if the beholder is blind. Oh, no, yeah, that's a great piece. I don't see it, but I hear it moving, and moving art is always great.
Yeah, the gears. It grinds his gears.
It grinds everyone's gears. No, it's a piece of the field. It probably wouldn't be his first move, but Derek Jeter's the kind of guy who's going to look at that thing and go, ugh.
I'll tell you the one thing I said to our friend Adnan Burke. This also to me screams stability for Donnie Baseball.
Yeah.
No reason that he should have gone anywhere anyway with the new ownership group.
Right.
But to have a guy who is a legend in Yankees lore with a team that is owned by a guy who is the legend in Yankees lore, at least in this generation.
In this generation, for sure.
I think it's great stability for him, and he's a good manager. Cares about his guys. Obviously, a guy who went through the Jose Fernandez tragedy, so he has a deeper kinship with that ball club.
Right.
The one thing that bugs me, and the same thing I told Adnan, is that $1.2 billion is what that ownership group paid, which I thought
Right.
at least would come down a little bit. But that stadium, which is a gorgeous stadium, one of the most gorgeous stadiums I've seen in Major League Baseball, is a $500 million stadium. Big price tag. Worth it for everything you put into it, for what, for the amenities that you need for the 21st century.
Problem is,
But when the majority of the city, the taxpayers are paying
city
for
and
it,
Dade County, yeah.
how in the hell did Jeffrey Loria make off like a bandit with all that money when he barely put anything into it?
Right. And that's business, right? And that's exactly what happens. And so $500 million for the stadium. The majority of that money the taxpayers are on the hook for. Not only that, they're on the hook for maintenance and upkeep.
Right.
Similar situation what's going on here in the Southwest. But $500 million is going to be returned to Loria for the cost of that stadium. And what did he put up? 20%?
I think less. I think it was less than a fifth. Yeah.
So that's business, and that's a business of baseball. I've said 100 times that billionaires shouldn't ask taxpayers to build them stadiums. I don't like it. If they want $1 billion stadium, $500 million stadium, you're the billionaire. You're going to reap all the benefit.
Right.
You're going to get all the profit. You build the stadium. Don't make the taxpayers do it.
I'm fine if county or city government chips in a part.
Sure.
But it should be a fraction of a part,
or
not
simply,
the majority.
Or simply just a tax break.
Right.
If you want to give the owners a tax break, fine. But don't ask the taxpayers to pay that money.
Especially if you're hiring, guys who are doing construction that are local, from local businesses.
Sure.
That's going to be your primary guys that are building
Sure.
it. I'm fine with that. But no, there's no way that you can have them pay the majority of your fees and then go ahead and pull that.
And in about 80% of cases, and this is another sad thing, in about 80% of cases, if you ask the businesses who are in an area before the ballpark comes in, they will tell you that the hardest thing that ever happened to them was trying to survive after a ballpark arrived.
Really?
Because the people who come to the ballpark aren't there to go sit in a little local eatery.
Right.
It's going to bring in the huge chains. It's going to bring in the arrogant butchers and the tilted kilts and the Fridays, and that's great.
Right.
That's more business for the county. That's more tax money for the county. However, the mom and pop shops who were there before, they get strangled out by that. It doesn't really help the community as much as we all think it does.
Right. And as much as we are frustrated by the idea of billionaires, asking cities for stadiums or having issues, we're sitting in a stadium that's going through something very similar to this. As Major League Baseball has come up and said that if Chase Field is not, and you'll know the verbiage better than I, but if Chase Field doesn't have certain renovations and some changes made, they're considering moving the Diamondbacks, which A, I think is ludicrous. It's a great stadium. B, if you're going to go ahead and make something like that, before you even address what the hell is happening in Oakland County Coliseum, there's a problem here.
Well, O.Co Coliseum has been a horrible place to visit my entire life. I remember going to the Oakland Coliseum back in the early 1990s, watching the A's play there, and having the same issues that we hear about now, that we hear about on social media, that we hear about on the news with the sewage backing up, and it's in a terrible neighborhood. It's falling apart. Well, it was falling apart 20 years ago. It was falling apart 25 years ago.
Well, Mark Mulder told us when we talked to him at the Diamond Resorts Invitational in Orlando, you get there, you hear, we're going to get a new stadium. And every year you hear, we're going to get a new stadium. And he has never seen a change made to that stadium when he was there with Oakland, when he's gone back as being an analyst for them and, in the media side. What they
do is they renovate.
Crap.
What they do is they renovate and they remodel. But they don't fix anything.
Right.
And that stadium is almost all concrete. And eventually...
Which you would know well.
Right. Which they're going to... That stadium's going to be there for a long time unless they dismantle it. But
if they can withstand a furry chin, they can withstand anything.
No. That wasn't Oakland Coliseum. That was that was Candlestick.
Oh, you were Candlestick. Okay.
That was Candlestick.
I thought you were at Oakland for some reason.
No, and it was my nose.
No, same thing.
Yeah, my nose is not like my.
They're
chin.
close,
relatively.
Okay. Moving on.
True though, if Major League Baseball is not going to at least look into what's going on in Oakland, because they've ignored it for several years. In fact, they've ignored I can't, there's no other way to put it. The miserly ownership of the Oakland Athletics has been ignored for decades.
Right.
And only this past year have they even made moves to take money away from that team in terms of profit sharing from the TV side if they don't use it to improve play.
Well, for God's sakes, Moneyball was romanticized, was made into a movie.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's become a part of the everyday baseball lingo. It's Billy Bean Moneyball stuff. Like,
yep.
Okay, but is that,
Chase Field
what is that going to get you?
Chase Field has its issues. There are infrastructure issues here. Now, when pipes back up in the kitchen and burst, that's an infrastructure issue, and it does happen here on a relatively regular basis. We have had sewage issues here similar to what they've had in Oakland.
It's crappy.
But this stadium, like the one in Miami, was funded with the assistance of taxpayer dollars. The contract states the taxpayers are also on the hook for the repairs and renovations. But this team has seen a massive amount of support and success in this stadium. And for the ownership not to say, you know what, we did that back when we were a new ball club.
Yeah.
We did that back when we didn't know how this thing was going to go. We did that back in an expansion
It was World
team,
Series and then nothing.
but they still filled the seats.
Right.
And we did this back when we didn't know how this expansion thing was going to go.
Yep.
So now that we've had a good amount of success, especially this year, especially with the World Series win, the several National League Division wins that West Division wins that they've had, the couple of NLCS wins that they've had.
We're sitting underneath the banners. They're right above us.
Right. And for them to not say, you know what, we're making the money off of all this.
Right.
We're the ones reaping the rewards financially for this on a far greater level than the taxpayers for the tax money coming in. We're going to go ahead and take care of those renovations. For them to sue the city of Phoenix and the county of Maricopa,
it's a joke.
It's absolutely a joke. It's absolutely a joke, and you're not winning any hearts and minds there. And then to come out and say that they're willing to move over it from a city that is the sixth largest media market in the country, the sixth largest city in the country.
My simple question is this: where? You tell me a city that has a stadium ready to go for you to move into. Off the top of my head, I got nothing. Unless you want to say, we're going to try Montreal again.
And again, like I said, a city that will support you. The Montreal issue is nobody wanted to go watch games in Montreal.
And look at the number of Hall of Famers that started there.
Right.
Randy Johnson, Vlad Guerrero. I mean, even a Moises Alou wasn't a Hall of Famer, was a long-time solid player.
Right.
A lot of good pieces.
Right.
Larry Walker came out of there.
We just had a Montreal Expo inducted in the Hall of Fame this year.
Tim Raines makes it in.
Tim Raines.
Probably one of the last guys who will wear an Expos hat. I believe he wore an Expos Expos hat.
He did
in the Hall of Fame. So it's just, like you said, I don't it boggles my mind that a group of owners who have more money than they can probably fill this stadium if you just drop dollar bills in here. Single Washingtons can't go ahead and at least, reach down, have the intestinal fortitude to do what is right, and spend some money to make things right for your fans. Everyone said the fans come first. If that's the case, then stop trying to stick everybody who's around to make them pay for your stuff. And you know what? Some people maybe don't get a chance to come to your games because the funds aren't there.
And if I have to pay $21.50 for a hot dog, fries, and a souvenir cup, then you can afford to fix your own pipes.
Yeah. Or lower, or
lower the price of concessions to similar prices outside the ballpark, or keep your concession prices and fix your own damaged part.
Yep.
Stop trying to put us on the hook for all of it.
I agree.
We're on the hook for the taxes. We're on the hook for the concession prices. What do you want from us? Yes, your ballpark prices to get in the ballpark are among the lower ones in Major League Baseball.
Right.
But as a season ticket holder, I pay an exorbitant amount of money for my season tickets. I don't get much of a discount on food.
Right.
I get $1.
Yeah.
An average of 10 to 15% on certain things. So, in my opinion, you can afford to fix a broken pipe. I bet my $3,000, $3,500 that I paid for my season tickets could fix that broken pipe.
So, as we get ready to wrap things up here.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to go behind the mask.
Speaking of things.
A little behind the mask.
Adrian
Beltre is in the news again for another odd reason. And no, it does not have to do with an ejection for moving the on-deck circle.
Which, by the way, I just like to point out that Rizzo was nowhere near the on-deck circle last night. No one said a word to him.
He was close. He was within a foot or two. We're talking.
He was within 3 or 4 steps.
Yeah, Beltre was there was a gap.
Yeah.
So,
and I get it. As a hitter, you want to be in a place where you can time the pitcher.
Right.
But also, you got to be in a place that's safe.
Correct.
And they have those on-deck circles measured out as the least likely path of a batted ball.
Yep. And even for high school ball, the on-deck circle has that there is a rule book measurement of where it needs to be minimum.
Yeah.
So Joe West, who we've talked about before, he's notorious, he's vilified, he's a very good umpire.
Great umpire.
Was suspended for 3 days, for 3 games this week, for comments that he made in an interview about his 5,000th game. And the reporter asked him, who is the biggest complainer in the game of baseball right now?
Which, let me stop you right there. That was a setup question that never should have made it through the pre-interview process. And if it wasn't on the pre-interview list, then for him to have asked it ad-lib in the interview,
right.
Joe West, and I understand that Joe West is the kind of person who likes to get embroiled in controversy, likes to answer questions like that, likes to stare guys down on the field and create issues. But Joe West should have ended the interview at that point. That was a setup question that, in my opinion, was a garbage interview question from a reporter who did himself no favors. That's a garbage. It's a rookie move. It's a Bush League move on the reporter's part. And I think that he owes Joe West a public apology for that question. But go ahead.
So, very nice.
Thank you.
So he gets suspended for 3 games for saying that it was Adrian Beltre. Say, you get a pitch in the zone, even if there was no question, he would look at you and say, that wasn't a strike, and basically that West would tell him, you're a lot better player than you would be an umpire. And everything is, I think, clearly in jest. If you know West, I don't think there's any idea that he is trying to be, rude, insulting, and
maybe.
And I mean, Beltre has even come out and said that, yeah, he told me about it. I don't think he should be suspended. He told me he was joking. We cut up. We were laughing about it when I saw him earlier this year. Here's what I don't understand. And the World Umpire Association, the Umpires Union, has had a massive issue with the suspension. It went through. He was back on the field last night with his crew. Figures that his crew actually was here for the Dodgers series right before we came in. Obviously, our friend Hunter Wendelstadt on that crew as well. Here's my issue. West has done things multiple times, and we've seen him getting in guys kind of maybe a little bit of baiting. And sure, right. Baiting happens on every level.
And the stare downs,
right?
Nothing on the level
of
the
mad bum, and then
nothing on the level of what Hernandez does.
We'll get into that. But what I don't understand is why this is the thing that Major League Baseball decides to push. There was nothing that was egregiously insulting of Beltre. He was asked a question. He answered it. It was an innocent answer. He didn't go into large detail of what he says to him. It was just basic stuff. And I will tell you that every umpire looks at the player and goes, you know what, you play the game, I'll umpire the game. Let's go ahead and keep our rules what they are. He didn't do anything that would have Beltre up in arms saying that he was insulted or felt that he was being treated badly.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
Right. And then for Beltre to come out and say, I don't think he should be suspended, to me there is a bigger agenda here by Major League Baseball to go ahead and suspend the longest tenured umpire in Major League Baseball to this point, Joe West, who is on the cusp in the next 2 years of surpassing the record for most games umpired all time, to go ahead and take him, who has done an amazing amount of things for umpiring as a whole. Obviously, yes, he was part of the strike that happened, that resulted in a lot of guys resigning. Some lost their jobs. I believe Al Kaiser is one who passed away this week. Our condolences to his family, and also Teddy Barrett was a good friend of him, a Major League umpire. So our condolences to him and all of his his umpiring family out there. But to me, there is more. And you mentioned the Hernandez thing, and that to me was the key point. I understand that Angel Hernandez had the All-Star game at first base, and that is said to have come out, those assignments, before the suit happened. But to do something like this to an umpire that has as much credibility and as much pedigree as Joe West does, for something seemingly this small, it screams to me that baseball is trying to set themselves up to start handling umpires, certain umpires specifically, who are the ones who players can complain about either having issues with trying to bait them into things, trying to cause issues, trying to get guys to go ahead and act out so that they can go ahead and be judge, jury, and executioner and toss them. We saw what happened this past, I think it was last week in Toronto, where Hernandez does something, pulls his mask off. We see Russell Martin tell him, put your mask back on.
Right.
Which, when you see a catcher saying that, I mean, there's a rapport, there's a respect there between those two positions as an umpire and a catcher. Martin was ticked because he felt that the guy behind home plate was baiting his pitcher, trying to go ahead and interject himself as an umpire into the game to make a decision that was going to affect that team for a much longer time than just that one inning.
Right, and this is something we talked about between the two of us with the baiting that Angel Hernandez is doing, that there's not an instantaneous reaction, nothing that pulls Angel Hernandez away from that situation in the same way he could pull Martin out.
Right.
Martin turns around and tells him to put his mask back on. If Angel Hernandez is taking offense to that, he could have dumped him.
Right.
And
he was poor ejection if he had, but yes, he could have.
He could have dumped him. But poor ejection, but he had a piss poor attitude in the first place trying to bait the pitcher.
Right.
So in the long run, Martin puts his own game at risk. Also the possibility of a fine for the way he spoke to the umpire by turning around and saying, hey, put your mask back on.
Now, you could read his lips. No profanity was used.
Right.
But it's very simple that you make the toss, you go ahead and write something up. I mean, there is no recourse as a player. Yeah, maybe you can appeal the fine, but you can't go ahead and appeal that, hey, we lost this game by 1 run and I could have been I could have been that help. Guy. And sorry. So, yes, there is – as Alan Slaughter's entry says, go Orioles. Alan, I appreciate your fandom for Baltimore. They have certainly not done what we expected this year. But on the bright side,
all wrong on that one.
Zach Britton is still there. I'm sure if he isn't, he will be on revocable waivers. But, at least you're seeing that they're hoping to kind of get back on track. You still have the Trumbo. You have the re-signing there. Machado's a piece you've got to keep.
Alan, I'm sorry, but Mark Trumbo is probably at the top of most disappointing players of the year.
We went from a bunch of a Trump bomb last year to a Trump dud. A Trump dud. It was kind of
And realistically, and like I've said 100,000 times, past performance doesn't accurately predict future performance. But from watching what he did in 2016, there's no way you could say he's going to have issues in 2017.
Yeah, I didn't expect this.
But 20 teams decided that he might, and they made the right decision, in my opinion.
Now, again, we'll see what happens next year. And of all things, and we'll end with this, it wouldn't really matter how well they were doing. Because, now, to be fair, if the Orioles, the Rays, the Yankees, and the Red Sox were all competitive, that would be a hell of a division to watch.
Sure.
But it wouldn't. I don't think it would have had the outcome that you would have wanted on the on the season coming through. So, man, finally, a little over a year into the show, we get a chance to go live. Before we get done here, I want to say one thing, and I want to send. I know we didn't discuss this, but I want to go ahead and send out a kind of a shout out and a hello to some people that we both know, and that's. Again, I don't know her retired rank, but that would have been Drill Sergeant Witherspoon for us, Michelle Witherspoon. I know Master Sergeant retired, Amanda Wall, and obviously now Captain Ricardo Resto. Those are the guys we explained, obviously, when we first started the show that Chris and I met at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. It's a training site for the Ordnance Corps in the United States Army for ammunition specialists. A love for baseball that we didn't talk about as much there, surprisingly enough. But just a kind of a camaraderie and a brotherhood that is held on since then. And those three people that we mentioned were instrumental in just kind of moving us through a time when you're learning a lot, and they saw some things that have taught us, I think, leadership and a lot of life lessons outside of just what happened in the military. And just a huge thank you and a hello to them.
Well, and we would be remiss if we forgot to mention Sergeant First Class at the time, I think eventually Master Sergeant First Sergeant James Taylor, who was also, while he wasn't part of our platoon, he was a driving force behind a lot of the motivation
He was a sandstorm.
He was a driving force behind a lot of the motivation that we had that kept us going while we were there. Obviously, Sergeant Witherspoon. At the time, Sergeant, now Captain Resto, was obviously very motivational. Our direct platoon sergeants while we were there. And then, of course, Sergeant Wall, who never let us give up on ourselves.
Groupies.
So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you to them. This has been sort of a long-term friendship that has blossomed from that time that we had at Redstone Arsenal. I don't know if you guys realize this, but that time in our lives was nearly 10 years ago, 9 years ago almost exactly. And we haven't seen each other in person since then.
Since you PCS in 08. So it was just after July. So, yeah, it's been a long time, man. It's a blast to be out here. Obviously, I'll see you again in a couple of months, and maybe we start making this a more recurring thing.
Hopefully.
It's
an expensive recurring thing.
It is. But, if your wife's here, you could just, I don't know, leave her here with the kid, and you just fly out by yourself. One ticket's easier than 2 tickets.
She didn't think that
Why
was
is she
funny.
laughing?
Why
is she grabbing a knife?
You should run now.
I got railing behind me, for God's sake.
You should find a door.
I'm not airborne qualified.
There's a door over there.
There is a door over there. Guys, again, thank you all so much for sitting and watching, listening. If you were just going to have a chance to grab the podcast, this will be up on the Out of Left Field Facebook page. We would be remiss if we didn't go ahead and just let you know we are a part of the Grueling Truth Network. Check them out at The Grueling Truth on Twitter and thegruelingtruth.net. Of course, MLB Mayhem also bring us to their readers where their prime podcast every week. For Chris _OO Left Field, I'm at Graham _OO Left Field. Of course, the Out of Left Field Facebook page. Chris and Graham Facebook page. Check it out. This will be up there. We'll be on it, and you'll have plenty of time to go back and watch this if you didn't have a chance to catch it live.
And don't think that because he's out here that there's going to be any kind of break. We're going to be right back next week. Of course, it'll be another distance broadcast as they usually are.
Yeah.
But we will, of course, be back with more stories who, as we are right now, are straight out of left field.